He was first elected more than a decade ago to the opposition benches as a progressive conservative MPP. Since then, Randy Hillier has often been referred to as a maverick, which is perhaps a more polite way of saying someone who's known to stir things up. That was never more apparent than this week when the member for Lanark-Frontenac-Kingston held a news conference to make some stunning allegations. It's all put Randy Hillier very offside from the Premier and his team, so much so that he was ejected from the caucus. And the now independent MPP joins us now for more. Good to have you in that chair.
It's a pleasure to be on the agenda with you, Steve.
Thanks for making time for us. Well, you described this week, here's your words, a culture of fear and intimidation at Queen's Park right now. How does that manifest itself?
In a multitude of ways, Steve. Within the caucus itself, people are fearful of being berated and belittled if they have opinions or views that are nuanced or differing from the caucus leadership.
What happens? Does somebody actually get up and shout you down?
People have been... the conduct is far less than professional or respectful. It's happened to me. It's happened to others in caucus.
Who does it?
Generally, Dean French.
Chief of Staff.
He's not the only one. But the main perpetrator, I guess we would say. And everybody knows that if you deviate from the line that's been established, you will be shunned. You will be ostracized, you'll be marginalized, and your ability to conduct and discharge your duties as a member of the provincial parliament will be severely restricted, or they'll be completely prohibited.
And you're not the only one this has happened to in the caucus?
Well, we've seen what happened with Amanda Simard when she wanted to have the ability to speak about her constituents in largely a francophone riding of Prescott, Glengarry, Russell. She was prohibited from speaking in the House. When she made a rookie error of standing at the wrong time for the vote, her vote was not recorded the way that she wanted to. The unanimous consents that were put forward to permit her to speak were all rejected. So the tools of a legislator are removed. They're taken away from you, and if you deviate from that established line.
Well, tell us, one of the rumors that we've heard is that if MPPs on the PC backbench don't stand up and cheer hard enough when the Premier or a minister makes an announcement or gets off a good line in question period, they are upbraided for that. Is that true or false?
Well, it doesn't need to be a good line. It's any line. And it's every line, Steve. And you know, we've seen it. It's gotten to the point of extreme comical. This would be a comical situation if it wasn't so serious that we're dealing with people who have a duty to represent their constituents. And so it's absolutely true. You know, I can say without a doubt, the Premier has stood up in caucus and told people that he expects people to stand and applaud, and that he is severely disheartened if he turns around and doesn't see people standing.
Well, let me make his argument just for argument's sake. And the argument is politics is a team sport, and you got to have loyalty to the team. And if you don't demonstrate loyalty to the team, they can't count on you. What about that?
Well, I think the metaphor of a team sport is not quite complete. You know, politics, although it has some similarities to sport, we're talking about public policy. We're not talking about entertainment, or we ought not to be anyway. This is about serious administration, good governance, proper representation and administration of the largest province in a great country, right? And to reduce that down to a recreational activity well, we see what happens. We don't get good governance, and we get turmoil because, you know, but a team, I would also say this, a team is people who collaboratively work together, okay? And they allow each other to bring the best out of one another. That's what a good team, a successful team would do. This team obstructs. They are in contempt of the Parliament. By a member cannot choose to read a petition into the House without getting the permission of the team. Okay, that's a fundamental that my constituents and every constituent believes that if they sign a petition, it can be read in the House. Part of the PC team, you have to get permission from Dean French. And this is what we're, the same with if I want to bring a motion to the House and table a motion. And I've tabled hundreds of motions over the years, Steve. Now I have to get Dean French's or some other group of unelected people to approve of my motion or my private member's bill. And we can go on. I've seen it specifically, members who have advanced and had their private member's bill, which again is a fundamental right and privilege of a member to exercise, have it pass second reading, and then have the unelected members of the caucus leadership direct the members on the committee not to hear the bill. This is all, in a way, though, part of the sort of pendulum of increasing power in the leader's office versus the power of the backbench. And you're obviously trying to plant a flag for more power for the backbench. Is that out of step with the times when everybody really focuses on the leader? Well, there has been that trend. And like every trend, it continues, and it continues to its extreme until it reaches a precipice. And I think we've seen what happens in the Federal House of Commons when the elected backroom, unelected backroom, correct, thank you, usurp and take the authority from the elected people and go so far as to attempt to have them do things that are unlawful or to impede on their authority as the Attorney General or as an elected member, not to do what they believe is in the best interests. Okay. Right? Tell me this. Who's running the government of Ontario right now? I think that's up for debate. You know, I don't know every nuance and every detail, but it is an astonishing amount of authority that Dean French and the unelected people have. Any more so than in any other time? Oh, significantly. In my years, I've seen many chiefs of staff. I've seen many backroom operatives, if we want to use that word. But astonishing to see the chief of staff at the planning priorities and actually conducting the business of the planning priorities committee when I was there. That is different. That is, it's an obscene distortion of what a staff member is. I know you're not at cabinet, but do you know whether he sits at the cabinet table? He's at the cabinet table as well. He sits at the cabinet table? Absolutely. The chief of staff? Yep. That is unprecedented, I think. It is obscene. Well, you call it obscene. What's wrong with it? Well, because people elect me. They elect members. They don't, they have confided in us their confidence for elected people to represent them and to make decisions on their behalf. They didn't elect Dean French. Most people don't know who he is. Right, but they elect... Most people didn't elect Jerry Butts. Nobody elected Jerry Butts. You know, they have a role to take direction, provide advice as well. Yep. Don't get me wrong. And you want to have good, competent staff that you can rely on their advice, but they're not the decision makers. Is Doug Ford the decision maker? I think there's been a real vacuum in leadership. And, you know, I think, in all fairness, I think Doug Ford comes to this from a background of municipal politics, not caucus or partisan politics, and wasn't fully aware or informed. It's a big learning curve, for sure. Of course it is. From municipal to provincial, for sure. And I think that was one of the startling aspects for me. You know, we all know that we all have weaknesses, and you want to buttress your weaknesses with the best able and competent people that you can. So to see to see the campaign team transition from the campaign team to the chief of staff team, well, running the province is not the same as running a campaign. There's very different attributes and skills and knowledge required to do it properly. So to have a campaign team to be there full-time, year-round, for 4 years, to be the chief of staff, don't be surprised that we have had a multitude of muck-ups and problems emanating from from the Premier's office.
Okay, you know Randall Denley, I suspect.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he's obviously columnist for the Ottawa Citizen now. He's a former candidate, actually, for your party.
He was.
Here's what he had to say about this whole situation. Some people just aren't cut out for party politics. After a dozen years in office, Randy Hillier should have realized he was one of them. Being elected under a party banner requires people to work with their colleagues to achieve the party's goals. Politicians give up their right to push their personal points of view in public in exchange for the opportunity to influence government behind closed doors. If you don't get that, you shouldn't be in politics. Unfortunately, Hillier has a history of disgruntlement and placing his own interests ahead of the rest of the group. What would you say?
See, there's the falsehood. You know, he's coming at this from a premise that people in caucus have influence. So when there is no influence, when dissent is belittled and berated on, that the whole premise is discounted. And not surprisingly, Randall Denley, although he was a candidate, has never been in elected office. Right. And he may be a fine writer and a fine thinker, but he lacks the knowledge of what he's talking about there. I've been in politics for 12 years. I've never been kicked out of caucus. I've had some penalties. I've had some disagreements.
Well, let's get a little...
But there has to be disagreement. There has to be some level of tension within any organization if you want to achieve the best outcome.
You mean behind closed doors?
Behind closed doors,
that's gotta
absolutely.
Be allowed. Well, you know, again, now that you've come public with this, some of your critics are saying, the guy couldn't get along with John Tory when he was the leader. He couldn't get along with Tim Hudak when he was the leader. He couldn't get along with Patrick Brown when he was the leader. And now Doug Ford's the leader, and he can't get along with Doug Ford either. Maybe it's Randy, maybe it's not all those four leaders.
I got along with John. I got along with Tim. I got Patrick. It ended up there was some serious cases of misconduct that came to light. But you know, I'm there to represent the people of Lanark-Frontenac-Kingston. First, foremost, okay? So will there be some stickly situations? John Tory and I still speak. We speak highly of one another. Tim Hudak and I still speak. We speak very highly of... I haven't spoken with Patrick Brown.
No, you and Patrick left it on pretty bad terms.
But listen, you know, but I will say this, you know, I had a route back. You know, I was offered a way back.
Into the caucus?
Into the caucus.
Well,
but I would not accept those terms.
What did it involve?
That I laid them out in a number of situations. One of the most egregious ones in my discussions with Doug's emissary in the negotiations was that even if I saw wrongdoing, unlawful activities taking place, I was not permitted to raise those matters with anyone other than the emissaries or Doug.
Well, but you have done that.
I will not. If I see unlawful activity going on, I will speak out.
As you have.
Absolutely.
I mean, you've blown the whistle on what you have identified as potentially illegal lobbying.
Yeah. So there was a route back. If I wanted to stand and ovate, if I wanted to agree that I couldn't dissent, if I agreed to accept everything and not speak to anybody,
you'd be back in.
I could be back in.
But that was a non-starter.
But that was not. Why would I be in politics? Why would I go out and seek the confidence of tens of thousands of people to do nothing?
Can I ask you about these, these allegations about illegal lobbying? What have you done with those allegations?
I'm meeting with I have had some preliminary discussions with the Integrity Commissioner. I'm meeting again very shortly with the Integrity Commissioner to go over more of those details.
Has the Commissioner agreed to look into it and investigate?
He's agreed to sit down and talk to me and have me show my hands. And we'll have a discussion about how to proceed.
Okay. Is there any part of you that regrets where things are at today, regardless of who's at fault? I mean, this can't be. This has got to be tough for all sides to go through, is what I'm saying.
Well, I think it was unnecessary in many aspects, Steve. You know, people, we expect in life that people are going to have disagreements. And we expect reasonable people will be able to resolve those disagreements.
For the record, I mean, I guess we have to put this on the record, they deny everything you're saying.
Sure.
They say that all of the allegations you have made are not true.
Yeah.
They go further in saying, you know, Randy doesn't even show up to, even when he was in caucus, he didn't show up to caucus meetings or retreats or other things.
Yeah, I've addressed that, you know, because I had many discussions with the Premier and his Chief of Staff over a number of months. I laid it out first. You know, my very first meeting with Dean French back in August 2nd last year, he told me he wanted me out of caucus. Specifically, uniquely, told me at Doug Ford's mom's house when we were having a barbecue. Okay?
Did he tell you why?
We'll get into that after. But, you know, so there had been a number of frustrations, you know, this shunning, this marginalization that I've told you, the obstructing people from doing their job. That was in place with me. But I worked with Doug very well. And the last time we were talking about, and this was on February 19th. I was suspended on February 20th. February 19th, after question period, I had a private meeting with Doug and a couple of staffers, not Dean French, and we talked about these things, and he directed his staff. He said, you get Hillier in the speaking rotation. You know, he's not getting speaking time.
So it was a good faith effort to get you back on side.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I said, well, what about this about the committees? Are you going to strip me out from the committee work, from the committee chair? And he said to me, he said, Randy, he said, I feel like I'm your lawyer. I'm always defending you. But I'm going to go to bat for you. And that was a profound moment. Here's the Premier, the leader of the party, telling me that he's going to go to bat for me. Well, with who? With who? And why is he always defending me? Against who?
In other words, he's the decider. He should just be able to make it happen.
Well, but why is he defending me to his Chief of Staff? Why is he going to bat with the Chief of Staff? You know, I don't think he ever recognized the long-standing grudge that Dean French had with me, and what Chris Frog had with me.
He was the chair of the transition team.
Yeah.
We are sadly down to our last 30 seconds here. Time has just flown. But if these problems are as big as you say they are, do you anticipate there will be others following you out of the caucus?
There's a great deal of fear there. And I would say this, Steve. Everybody learns from their experiences, and the greater the experience, there should be the greater the learning and lesson. Maybe this will be an opportunity for Doug Ford to learn some good lessons and treat his caucus with greater respect and regard, and take ownership of the Premiership of Ontario.
We will keep watching with interest. That's Randy Hillier. He is the independent now MPP for Lanark-Frontenac-Kingston. Thanks for coming in to TVO tonight.
It's a pleasure.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.